Hello, this is Dr. Branch. We're going to talk today about poverty and its relationship to divorce, marriage, living together, remarriage, how all these things connect into at least some of the divorce data here in the United States. For my students outside the United States, my many apologies. So my data deals with this country alone. So let me just give you an idea of how divorce was viewed early on. This is a photograph from Life magazine in 1905, and this was a political cartoon intended to depict a positive view towards divorce. And if you notice, this woman is chained to this rather unseemly man who looks remarkably like Orson Welles in Citizen Kane. Here we have this lovely lady, and on the other side of this gate, which is called divorce, is a garden. It's beautiful. It's hard to see, but it's beautiful and green and verdant. And in the way of the gate is a man, and he's wearing both a hat and the billy club like a policeman, and then the vestments of Christian clergy. So the idea is that both the law and the church are keeping the woman from this gate of divorce, which is going to lead to her freedom, and she's chained to this mean and grumpy old man. So divorce was viewed as a positive thing early on by feminists. No-fault divorce, the first nation with no-fault divorce was Soviet Russia in 1918. At the risk of making the genetic fallacy, those are the first people to do it. It should probably give us some reason to pause. California was the first no-fault divorce state in the United States in 1969, and no-fault divorce describes any divorce where the spouse asking for a divorce does not have to prove the other spouse did something wrong. So now all states allow no-fault divorce at some level. This is where you get this idea of irremediable breakdown of marriage or irreconcilable differences. And prior to the rise of no-fault divorce, people had to prove a reason why the marriage should be ended, either physical abandonment or physical abuse or sexual adultery. There had to be some cause that necessitated the divorce. But now it's not that way. And what you need to know is that marriage is declining. Between 2000 and 2009, the share of young adults ages 25 to 34 who are married dropped 10 percentage points from 55 to 45%. In other words, more people in this age group are single as opposed to married. Many of them are just living together. So this changes the way we should think a lot about our demographic. Historically, Baptist churches have thought about reaching young couples and providing child care and excellent children's ministries. Well, many of these people are A, not getting married, and B, they're conceiving away any children, and in some cases, quite sadly, if children are conceived, they're aborted. So it's a moving dynamic which we're working with. So I can't stress enough that this is a major shift. Now most young people at the early ages of life, when it used to be this is when people were getting married, now more of them are unmarried than are married. So this is another way of looking at the data, and it just shows how it's going down year by year by year, the number of people within that age group that are married. And now well more than half of them have never been married. And marriage is declining. The total percentage of the U.S. population that is married is going down, down, down. So many people who are classified as single are actually cohabiting relationships, or they're in opposite or same-sex partners or some sort of thing. And so the sharp decline in marriage has been accompanied by a rapid increase in the number of cohabiting couples. So living together before marriage has, or just without marriage, it's not, many of them don't intend to get married, has replaced marriage. 2010 census data indicate that those with only a high school diploma have experienced a steep decline in marriage during the past decade. So it's interesting, marriage rates have held fairly steady for those with at least a college degree. I don't know what that says. I'm not quite sure what to make of that data or how to interpret it, but it is somewhat interesting. So it's going down for everyone, though, that those with a college degree are now more likely to get married, but far less so than they were 40 years ago. So marriage is declining. There were 124.6 million single Americans in August 2014, accounting for 50.2% of the population aged 16 and over. What that means is this is the first time the percentage of single adults outnumbered married adults. Now remember, a lot of these people are in cohabiting relationships. In 2008, non-marital births accounted for 41% of all births in the United States. And though many of these were to cohabiting couples, these unions are less stable and have fewer economic resources compared with married couples. Therefore, declining marriage rates put more children at risk of growing up poor, which can have lasting consequences for their health and future economic prospects. Singles are more likely to rent than to own homes and are less likely to have children. They have less household income, but they also usually have less expenses, usually. And this shows you your single percentage by metro population in areas of the country where there are more singles than others. It's just a way of kind of mapping out the country, and you see, I think that's Wyandotte County right there with a large percentage. Divorce among Christians. This is an interesting study of which I want you to be aware, and it's gotten a lot of play with secular people. It's 2 years ago. I'm recording this in 2016. In 2014, in the Journal of Sociology, two demographers, Jennifer Glass of Texas and Philip Levchuk of the University of Iowa, here's what they claimed. They assert individual religious conservatism is positively related with the individual divorce risk. And what they mean by that is if you live in a community that has more people who are religiously conservative, whether they're Baptist or Assembly of God or conservative Catholics or even conservative Mormons, you have a higher there's a higher chance just by living in that community of having a divorce than living in an irreligious community. And here's what they claim. So I'm going to read you their claims. I don't agree with all of them. Here's what they claim. They say that because we hold this high view of sex and we don't think you should have sex outside of marriage, more religious conservatives get married at a younger age. Then, because we get married at a younger age, we have children earlier than others. And because we're getting married and having children earlier, it makes it more difficult for us to finish college, and thus our young people have lower educational attainment. This results in lower incomes for conservative Protestant young people in an economy that often favors a college education, and that lower income and poverty is associated with divorce. So basically they're saying because we're religious conservatives, we're going to get married and have babies and be poor. That's what they're saying, and that leads to divorce. So here's a problem, and this is perhaps the major problem with the study. They don't differentiate between people who identify with a conservative Protestant group, such as someone who says, my name was on the roll of Turner Memorial Baptist Church, but I haven't attended in years, as opposed to those who are actively pursuing an intimate walk with Christ. So, what I would tell you is if you look at the data carefully, there's something extremely dangerous about being nominally religious to your marriage. You're either all in or you're not. And if you tease out the data, what you find is the divorce rate is actually much, much higher for those who have a nominally religious faith as opposed to those who are actively pursuing a walk with Christ. And one of the most dangerous things you can do for your marriage is be a half-hearted Christian. It's extremely dangerous for marriage. Barna stressed many times that the data between non-religious people and born-again people is about the same, that our divorce rates mirror each other. But if you look at evangelical Christians, actually you find that our divorce rate is somewhat lower, but not enough to brag about. I'm going to scoot past this. Here's what I do want you to see. The states with the highest divorce rates typically come from the Bible Belt: Arkansas, Alabama, Kentucky, Nevada, Georgia, Tennessee. So this also plays into the idea that religious conservatism is associated with a higher divorce rate. But again, they're not differentiating between people who are actively pursuing a walk with Christ and those who are only nominally involved, got baptized at Sunday school, or Vacation Bible School or something, and haven't been since. In 2000, Barna said Baptists had actually the highest divorce rate among evangelical groups. So there you go. Here is the share currently married by age in 2010. And notice that it goes down, how dramatically it goes down. For those ages 18 to 24 and 25 to 34, these used to be the ages where people got married, and now there are more singles than there are married people. It's marriage has just died. And so one of the things we want to do is encourage people to get married because it's what God says to do. So they're in a culture that discourages them from getting married. This shows you your divorce rates, how they skyrocketed after the rise of no-fault divorce. With the rise of divorce came a subsequent decline in marriage rates. I think those two are connected. I'm not exactly sure how one affects the other. The average age of first marriage has gone up and up and up. This is largely reflected by the rise of easy access to birth control. That's got a lot to do with it. People aren't as afraid of getting pregnant, so they wait till later to get married. But oddly enough, these birth control methods are not perfect, and the fertility rates for unmarried women have gone sky high. Almost half of children in the United States are born to unmarried mothers. It's high for every race, but highest for African Americans. But no race has anything to brag about. It's just showing you that the trend's up for everyone. So divorce and poverty for women. Researchers estimate divorcing individuals would need more than a 30% increase in income on average to maintain the same standard of living they had prior to their divorce. So women who get divorced, typically they get the kids and they're supposed to get alimony or child support, and lots of times that money doesn't come in. In a 2012 Australian study, after a divorce, a woman's household income typically drops, especially in the first year after the split. But in this Australian study, men, on the other hand, continue to see income growth. So the women are losing money the first year after a divorce, but men actually see more income come in. It's bizarre. In the U.S., the typical woman endures a 73% reduction in her standard of living after a divorce. Her typical ex-husband enjoys a 42% increased standard of living. So, and according to one study, and these numbers are all over the place, it depends on who you're reading, so this is a high number, but 61% of court-ordered child support is never paid, or is ever paid. That means about 40% is never paid. In 2009, just 17% of fathers had sole custody of minor children. It's almost always the woman. And here's what you do find. Those people who go to college and stay married are doing increasingly well over time. The best advice I can give to anyone financially is to get married and to stay married to the person whom you married the first time. Single parents without a high school degree are not doing so well over time. That shouldn't surprise you. Basically, over a long period of time, those who get married and stay married do better financially than those who have children out of wedlock and never get married. Older women are especially vulnerable to poverty. They typically live 13 to 14 years longer than their male partners. That should motivate every husband here to be extremely kind to his wife, because chances are she's going to bury you. And they're more likely than men to run out of resources late in life, which means we as men need to be working hard to save money to leave for our wives. Older women in poverty in the United States, the share of elderly women living in poverty is especially high for divorced elderly women. So divorced elderly women have a high rate of poverty. And again, I'm just stating again, the first year after the divorce is usually the worst. This is all leading to the feminization of poverty. It is the increasing female proportion of the population on low incomes or in poverty. Feminization of poverty is a social process in which the incidence of poverty among women becomes much higher than that among men. So these things that were intended to liberate women, no-fault divorce, easy access to contraceptives, easy access to abortion, all these things have not liberated women, but in fact have contributed to the feminization of poverty. What they all do is they release men from moral responsibility for the children they father. It also leads to poverty for children. Most children, 5 out of 6, live with their mothers after divorce. So if the mother is struggling after divorce, the kids are going to struggle too. 1 in 5 of women fall into poverty as a result of divorce. That means of divorced women. Remember, they usually have the kids. And 1 in 3 women who are living in a home they own, after the divorce, they wind up living in a home that they do not own anymore. So that's a loss of money. This means the children's lives will be uprooted. Not only do their parents leave each other, the children have to find another house. So divorce is extremely disruptive on kids. This is the number of families in poverty. And what you see is that single mother families have gone up and up and up. 2-parent families have gone up. This has a lot to do with the recession, but significantly lower. Again, the best advice I can give you is get married, and financially, is to get married and stay married to the person whom you married. Children in poverty. The 3/4 of children in divorced families live with their mother in 2009, while some 28% of them were below the poverty rate. So here's what I want you to see. Children living with their mothers 2009, after divorce. 28% of them were below the poverty rate. All other children were at 19%. So if you get divorced, it leads to a higher instance of poverty for the kids. And here's what you find is children of intact families spend less time in poverty than those, than those in never married families. And so what you see here is a child born in wedlock to marriages that stay intact. Only 6.3% of those kids ever spend any time in poverty. Children born out of wedlock to a mother that's never married, 56.7% of those kids spend some time in poverty. But look at this. Born in wedlock and they have a subsequent divorce, look how much it jumps from 6.3% to 20.3%. So divorce contributes to poverty for children. Here's what I would suggest to you. Someone has pointed out that 2 full-time employees working a $10 an hour a week job, which is not a lot of money, they're going to bring in roughly $40,000 a year, but it's not much, but it's enough to support a family well above the poverty line, even after child care or other expenses. So the best advice I can give you is, A, go to high school, graduate, get your high school degree, get some job, any job, work 40 hours a week, get married, and stay married to the person whom you marry. All those things strongly trend towards staying out of poverty. There's ethnic differences in the data. African American children are more than twice as likely to live in poverty as are white children. In 2008, 72% of African American children were born to unwed mothers, 17% of Asian children, 29% of whites, 53% of Hispanics, 66% of Native Americans. The rate for the overall U.S. population was 41%. So this graphs all this out for you, all these different groups and where they come out on the graph. I simply want you to see that out of wedlock births are strongly correlated with children living in poverty. And this just gives you an idea that this wasn't always so for black families, African American families in the United States. There was a time when much more of them had more of them had two-parent households. And I'm just letting you see that's declined over time. So I'm going to scoot through a few of these things. Here's what I would say again. Children born to unmarried mothers are more likely to grow up single-parent household, experience unstable living arrangements, live in poverty, and have socio-emotional problems. So I can't stress to you enough the degree to which poverty and marital dissolution are correlated. So here's what you need to remember from this lecture as you're preparing for the exam. Getting divorced is correlated with a much higher incidence of poverty for children. Children born to unwed mothers are correlated with a much higher incidence of poverty. What I would also point out to you is that the increased availability of contraception, abortions, and no-fault divorce has actually coincided with a highly increased rate of women in poverty. So I want you to see all these issues tie together. One's sexual ethics and poverty are often related, and that's what I want you to get out of this. Hope this has been helpful to you. God bless.